Yeah, hey. Let's see. It is September 30th, 2025, and we're about 1800 hours. I'm hemming and hawing a little bit. I gotta make this video. I have to make this video. I'm going to talk about something that's over 30 years old. What is it? Let me think. It was about 33 years old. Oh, that's old. Why talk about it after 33 years? Well, it involves murder. That's why. And there are certain people in this world, let me just throw it out there now. Why hold it back? There are people in the world, which it would be FBI, ATF, who are guilty of murder, and they've never been held accountable. And I am not particularly impressed with Kash Patel. I watched Kash Patel give honors and some kind of positive feedback to FBI people who they allege, I don't believe them, I believe it was other characters, not FBI, but nevertheless, two FBI characters over the death of Lavoy Finicum. That chapped my ass. I think I'm going to be David here today. I think I'm not going to sit here and curb my language because I'm going to speak the way I speak. I'm thinking this through. Obviously, I have not planned this at all. I have no script. I have no plan. I sat down just blank in my head, and here we go. But I've had this shit in my head for 30 years. It needs to be told. Now, so I'm obviously going to be talking about Ruby Ridge. I need to jump right into it because I think this is going to be terribly long. I want to talk about Ruby Ridge, but I'm going to be talking about myself as well. And there's what the world doesn't know is that after Randy Weaver, excuse me, was arrested, shortly thereafter, Randy and I were together every day for almost 2 years, probably about 22 months. I'm just kind of thinking a little bit. All right, let me get into it. So before Randy Weaver experienced a thing that infamously is called Ruby Ridge, I moved to Idaho. Let me think where I want to start. Let me just say this. I was in another state. I had a buddy that lived in Idaho, was sending me photographs of where he lived and things he was doing in the woods. And we grew up together in high school, this fellow and myself. Hold on, I'm going to turn something off on my screen up here. I got a mouse down here on this hand. So I got turned on by Idaho visually, and I was in a location where there's a whole nother story. I got about 5 movies of the week in me, so I would allege. And we get into the times where I start working as a private investigator, and it turns out that a lot of my past experiences just made me a hell of an investigator, really, really good. After this video I do here, I'm going to be putting together another video about a 27-year-old murder case that I examined, investigated, and turned over to a fellow named F. Lee Bailey back in 1998 in January. That's another time. All right, so I go back in time to the very early 90s, and in another state, because it's another story, I'll leave it out for now. For now, I'll probably do the story. Basically, I uncover a theft ring in the Duval County Sheriff's Office, Detectives Division. I uncover it because it happened to me. They stole my motorcycle. I tracked my motorcycle down. It tracked in lawful paperwork to a detective's house. I went to Internal Affairs and blew the whistle on these asshole pukes that were out there stealing from people. They stole my motorcycle, and that's a cool story. It's actually pretty cool. But I was going up against these entities, and I was not making any friends. And at the same time, I was going up against the feds, and they were doing some dirty tactics to me, really dirty stuff. That's part of the other story, and so I'm going to leave it out. But I decided to move to Idaho. When I got to Idaho, I hadn't been here very long, and I think back in hindsight, God, I remember where I was. This is crazy. I was in a four-wheel drive Jeep, sitting in the middle of a low, obviously low flowing river. You know, the water was up to my tires. I was sitting in the middle of a river, just sitting there in my Jeep, thinking. And I had met a person in my apartment complex where I lived in this other state, and, well, I've already told you where it was, didn't I? Okay, so it was Florida. And I didn't know her well. We were not romantically involved. I knew she was going through hard times at that time, and I am a fucking dumbass. Often. Jesus, man. I think back, if I had, here's why I'm bringing up the river. If I had not been sitting in the river having these thoughts I'm about to tell you about, my life probably wouldn't even be what it is today. I think that moment in time changed my whole fucking life. Sitting in the river, thinking about this family that's sitting back there struggling, and I'm sitting in Idaho and I'm going, wow, this is a really fantastic place. Cool place to kind of restart. That's what I was doing. And the thing that I did that was stupid is I sent this woman, just gotta throw cuss words in there, several $1,000s to move her ass up here, move her kids up here, and give them a new start. I have a soft heart, which is why I'm a dumbass. Wow, alright, I'll get off it. They moved up here, and so I'm going to get into my story, then my story will kind of pause as I bleed in Randy Weaver's story and the day we met and how it went for both of us. I'm in Boise, Idaho. I'm sitting in an apartment complex, or an apartment that I acquired at a complex, and I have moved this woman and her two teenage girls into the apartment with me, and we shared an apartment. Again, I was not romantically involved with this woman, so it was kind of weird. You'd think you would be, but I wasn't. Hold on, I'm trying to figure out where to start this. Now, I knew nothing about this woman. After the fact, I knew a lot, and it turned out this was an evil, evil, evil bitch from hell. And boy, well, you'll hear me. You'll hear what she did. Let's see here. I kind of walked into this one day. The two girls were both in junior high school, and they would walk to school. And one day, in the morning, I think we somehow got a call from the police, Boise police, that the two girls had been picked up. They'd gone to Albertsons in the morning on their walk to school, and they stole a box of donuts. And throughout this story, I called it the donut caper, haha. But they stole a box of donuts, and the police were calling to say, you can come down to you can come down to the police station and pick your daughters up. This, by the way, this woman's name that moved into my house, my apartment, was Nancy Denise Joyner. It's important because that name's going to come up and be utilized later. Nancy Denise Joyner. So I drove Nancy Denise Joyner to 7200 Barrister, not knowing Boise very well, to the sheriff's office / police department at that time. And they were inside for about an hour, and I'm waiting out in the parking lot. I don't know why it took so long, but it didn't seem unreasonable, an hour, and I waited. And she came out, and we went home. End of story. So I thought. I've always been a gym freak. You guys probably know I've lifted weights my entire life since I was 15. I'm 70 years old today, still lifting weights. But I say that because in this story, I was in and out of the house at some point during the day to go to the gym every day like I did. And so sometimes I'd be away from the house. I wasn't working, hadn't found a job yet at the time, but I got involved in things. We'll get there. This woman took a job. I don't even recall where she worked. I think she started out as some temp with some temp agency, but she had regular work, and I had an income from elsewhere. So, oh, I remember what it was. Let me back up. When we get home from the police department of picking up the girls, Nancy Denise Joyner tells me, "I didn't want you to worry," she says, "but I've been getting weird phone calls." And I said, "Okay, what gives?" And she tells me, "Well, a guy's calling on the phone. He says he can see my every move." And, I don't remember all the details after, 30 years, but he was saying that he was watching her, he could see her, and he was being slightly sexual and some other comments. And I told her, "Hey, the guy's calling on the phone. He's weak. It's nothing. Ignore the guy. Just forget about it. It's not a big deal." That was my advice. Very soon thereafter, I get messages saying the same thing. This guy keeps calling me, and I'm saying, "Just blow it off. The guy's nothing." I don't see any evidence of these calls. She's telling me. Why would I not believe her? I figured something coming out of her work or something of this nature, and so I let it go. At some point, notes were being delivered to the, and I'm trying to think, I believe, it's been so damn long I can't remember. I'm trying to remember, were they all delivered to the door, or did any come in the mail? I don't recall, but I do recall them coming to the door, and notes would come. I believe some of them were handwritten, and possibly one of them was not. And they would come to the door saying the same thing. "I can see your every move, be a good girl, do what I'm telling you to do," and, just really dumb shit. And I think some of these letters, notes, whatever, started to disturb me. I think there might have been suggestions of violence in it. And I'm trying to think. And I began to get concerned. When this woman, Nancy Denise Joyner, moved to Idaho, she had a big truck, which I paid for. And some of the things, she brought with her several firearms. They were suspect to me, these firearms. I thought possibly they were illegal. I don't remember why I thought that. But I didn't want them in the house. And I told her, "I don't want those guns in the house." And I guess we had a storage container, and I demanded that, well, I think most of her property was stored in the storage container, but these guns were definitely in the storage container. And I wouldn't allow them in the house. As these notes kept coming, there came a time where I called Boise Police Department, and I got a hold of a fellow by the name of Tony Wallace in Detectives Division. Tony Wallace. I remember him. I know damn well he remembers me. He knows what he did. And Tony Wallace is just a voice on the phone to me. And Tony tells me, when I tell him, "Hey, this woman is being threatened, and the children are being threatened with violence, and, I need help from the police to catch this guy." And Tony Wallace said to me, "That's not happening. That's not going on." And there came a time where I'm talking to him on the phone, and he said, "That sort of thing doesn't go on in Boise, Idaho, and that's probably not real, and I would just dismiss it, and there's nothing to help you with." And I was pretty perturbed, because here are the notes coming to the door, and what do you mean this isn't happening? And I'm looking at the fucking notes, and I'm kind of disturbed by this guy's behavior. When he ignores me outright on a couple calls, I go to the Ada County Sheriff's Office, and I get the same response. They're not going to come out and even take my report. They're not. So I went to two law enforcement agencies who both denied help on catching this guy, etc., and stopping the notes and the threats and so forth. Now, A threat. All you folks out there use language wrong. People say he assaulted me. No, he committed battery upon you. Assault is a threat. Assault is a threat only. So this guy leaving these notes was guilty of assault, and because he was threatening harm and violence and I think rape, and and so that's a threat, and it's a crime and it's a felony. Where to go here? Hold on. Let me think here. Let me think. Oh yeah. So when I got denied by the both law enforcement agencies in Boise, I suited up. Meaning I went to that storage container, got those guns, and started carrying them, and brought them in the house. I'm trying to remember. I believe there was. I think there was a long gun. It's been such a long time, and I believe there were 2 pistols. I remember there was a .45. I remember that because I carried that. 45 and a Beretta 9mm. Okay. So I'm suited up, but now I'm doing weird shit, and it's getting cold outside. Now, let me pause. Let me pause here for a second. This is going on. I think now's a good time to pause because we're in the fall and it's getting cold. Well, while it's fall and we're getting cold, a fellow by the name of Randy Weaver is sitting in the Ada County Jail. So let me back up to August, before this woman moved up here and this stuff started occurring, which was almost immediate. And let's move to Randy Weaver. So it's the end of August. As a matter of fact, it's the first day of bow season, so it's probably September 1. It's hot as hell outside in Boise. It's probably in the 90s. Up in the mountains, it was snowing. Where I was up in the mountains, camping in the woods, and my canteen froze solid. I think on the ride up there, on the radio, I'm hearing about Randy Weaver. I don't know if Ruby Ridge was a term yet, but I'm hearing about Randy Weaver and what's going on. It's coming over the radio. It's the early 90s. It's 92, and that's how things were delivered. And I'm listening to it go on. I'm aware that Randy Weaver is arrested. Not paying attention to anything really much, other than I'm rooting for Randy Weaver and not the feds. And that was in end of August, and this is going on. Ruby Ridge is going on the last days of August and into September. I don't remember the cutoff date, but so let's talk about Randy. So Randy Weaver is a fellow who had no record of any kind. He was a former Green Beret. He was a really decent guy, in my opinion. I liked him. In fact, we were literal. I guess I could say buddy for almost 2 years, literally side by side for 2 years. So I'll get there. If he's in jail, I must have gone too. I must have gone. All right, hold on, we'll get there. So the story goes that Randy is out and about. I'll elaborate on some things he told me about what his demeanor was on certain ideologies. He was not a white supremacist. He was not. I'll talk about that here in a minute. Randy was curious about the white supremacists, and there was a group in North Idaho, and some guy that ran it, and I can't remember all the names anymore. And according to Randy, he had gone to 1 or 2 of their meetings to see who they were. He indicated to me he didn't like them, and he wasn't going to have anything to do with them. But apparently Randy Weaver was seen by the feds who were watching the white supremacist guys in North Idaho, and so Randy Weaver got targeted. And according to the story, one of the informants that was woven into the skinhead white supremacist group up north, whatever you want to call them, was compromised, and the feds decided Randy Weaver should be their new informant. Over time, Another informant sided up to Randy as a friend, as the scumbags that they are, and wanted Randy to saw off a shotgun for him and shorten the barrel. And Randy informed him very clearly the legal length for a shotgun barrel is 18 inches, and I'm only going to saw it off as short as 18 inches. Why this guy couldn't saw his own friggin' barrel is beyond me. But, you know, Randy probably should have asked that question. So Randy measured the barrel from one end to the other and where the muzzle should be, and he scribes a line on the metal, and he saws it off. And if truth be told, according to the court, he sawed off on the wrong side of the scribe, so that the barrel was was too short. Let's say it this way: it was too short by the thickness of a hacksaw blade. What is that, like? Oh my gosh, I don't know. Like that much? The thickness of a hacksaw blade, it was too, he saw it on the wrong side of the line and made it the thickness of a hacksaw blade too short, and by God, they're going to get this dastardly fellow, this son of a bitch. Let's go get him. And they arrested him. They arrested him for that act. And they told Randy Weaver that they wouldn't prosecute him if he would agree to go spy on the Aryan Nation in North Idaho, and Randy Weaver told him, go fuck yourself. I'm not going to do any such thing. He takes his family and he goes up to a top of a mountain to some place that he built on the top of a ridge called Ruby Ridge. And according to the feds, had a fortress on top of Ruby Ridge. He had a fortress. It was a fucking plywood house. God. I'm just remembering the utter horseshit of these feds and what murdering scumbags they are. So there was a little bit to do with Randy was given a court date in some court somewhere, and there was some confusion about the date, which was the court's fault. But overall, Randy wasn't going to go to court anyway, according to him. He said, fuck those guys. And they put out a warrant for his arrest. It was a misdemeanor violation of failure to appear in court. Misdemeanor. He takes his family and goes to Ruby Ridge and says he's had enough of this shit. He wants to get away from everybody. Randy's up there a long time. What came out in court was that the U.S. Marshals, oh my God, I just said U.S. Marshals and three names just popped through my head. The names, let me give you some names because I don't care anymore. Dave Hunt, Warren Mays, and Mike Johnson. The Three Stooges. I've had conversations with Dave Hunt a couple of times because I'll do this story later. Dave Hunt and I don't know if Warren Mays was involved, but Mike Johnson and Dave Hunt were definitely involved. Tried to get me killed. If I remember, I'll tell you about it later. They tried to get me killed. They continue to do it to this day. 30 years later. So I'll do that story later. But so they were involved. Warren Mays, Dave Hunt, and Mike Johnson were involved in the Ruby Ridge fiasco. I don't know exactly what Mike Johnson did, but he got his ass canned. I don't know if marshals are fired. I don't think firing is the right term, but they're let go somehow, and Mike Johnson was no longer a U.S. Marshal. But how they stayed in the picture is that when Randy got arrested, those three characters who had been up in the woods on Ruby Ridge, had been up in the woods with their little night vision goggles and everything else, spying on Randy Weaver and his family for 15 damn months. They spent over $250,000 surveilling Randy Weaver, who's wanted for misdemeanor failure to appear in court. They spent over $250,000 to surveil him for a year and a half for a fucking misdemeanor. I'll sit here quiet for just a moment to let that sink in. That's what they did. They actually testified to the fact that they put video camera recorders in birdhouses and other stupid places and trees to spy on this family, which will come into play in just a minute, this spying, which went on for a year and a half. Randy's living in this house. Randy has his wife, a 14-year-old boy who in this time period just turned 14. He has a friend named Kevin Harris who's visiting, and he has 3 daughters, if I can remember their names. What are they? Sarah, Elishaba, and oh my God, don't forget the last name. Oh my gosh, I've forgotten it temporarily. I'm sorry. I met Sarah one day. She's not going to remember. She was 15 years old. She's a grown woman now, and I've not seen them since. And they don't know anything about me, and they do not know anything about this story. They do not know who I am, and I see no reason they would have. So everybody's heard of Randy Weaver, but you haven't heard of me. And the same thing that was done to Randy Weaver was done to me in a little bit different way. Same operation, and that's where this story's going. So Randy's being surveilled by these frickin' 3 idiots and probably others. And a day comes where it turns out the Marshals were getting angry. Randy had a dog, was it a golden retriever or something like that? I think it was a golden retriever, I believe. Anyway, his name was Stryker. And every time the U.S. Marshals would get near the house in the middle of the night with their NVGs and all this dumb shit, stupid fucking shit these fat fuckers were doing in the woods, the dog would bark and they couldn't get close to the house. It made him mad. I guess ATF was out there too, especially a guy named Art Roderick. We're getting ready to come to him in just a sec. So one day in the afternoon, Kevin Harris and Sammy Weaver are walking down the road, and Stryker is walking behind them. And as they walk down the road, unknown to them, Inspector Art Roderick of the ATF, biggest piece of shit in the world. Art, if you're out there and you see my name, come find me and challenge me any fucking day you want. You murdering, lying fucking coward. Art Roderick is out in the woods in a ghillie suit with a U.S. Marshal by the last name of Deegan. I've forgotten his first name. Deegan is wearing a ghillie suit. I believe Deegan is carrying a 223, 5.56, I don't know, that kind of rifle. I believe, I hope I'm not telling this wrong, I think this is correct. And I believe Art Roderick is carrying a Colt 9mm subgun. And they're hiding in the bushes. I hope I said that right. If I got it backwards, my apologies. It's been a long time. I'm kind of trying to remember their testimony from court. So, Art Roderick testified in court to the following things. These are his words. He says, I saw two armed men walking down the road, and I decided it was time to take the dog out. What? He sees 2 armed men walking down the road, and his first target of choice is a dog. And I wrote a letter to the editor, and I said, well, no doubt the dog was heavily armed. All right, but so Deegan decides to shoot the dog, and he shoots the dog in the ass, and the bullet travels up along the dog's spine, and Sammy and Kevin have their backs to the bushes. They've walked past the bushes. Stryker's behind them. And when they hear a gunshot, and when they turn around, Stryker's flopping around in the road, and he dies. It's a terrible thing. And Sammy knows that a gunshot came out of the bushes. He can't see anybody in the bushes, and he screams out something along the lines like, you son of a bitch. And Sammy has a .223 Ruger. What were those called? Shit, my brain is dead. Somebody help me. There's nobody here. Anyway, the Ruger 223. I can't remember the name of it. And he fires into the bushes, and weapons fire comes back out. Automatic weapons fire comes out. Kevin, meanwhile, has a bolt-action 30-06, and he's firing with a bolt-action. He couldn't have much more than 4 or 5 rounds. And Sammy gets hit, and I believe he's hit in the right bicep, don't quote me, but he's hit in one bicep. And the bullet takes the bicep muscle off the arm, which makes me think it's a .223 that tumbled. And Randy hears at the house a distance away shooting, and he comes out of the house and he starts screaming, "Sam, come home, come home." And Sam turns around and starts to run back home. It takes 4 steps down the road, and I believe it was Deegan that shoots him in the back. Oh my God, there's a bird in my house. I know how he got in here. You see him flying around? Oh hell, bird, you're gonna have to stay here till I finish this video. Hang out, man. Hang out on the counter. I have birds and bats that come down my chimney, which is in front of me. He just came down the chimney and came in the house. And I'll open the door later and let him out. It's weird up here where I live. Anyway, bird flying in my living room. Okay. So Sammy dies, and Kevin goes up to the house and tells Randy what happened. But here's what happens on the other side. Art Roderick of the ATF runs down the hill, calls FBI, back east, and says we were ambushed, we never fired a shot, and Deegan is dead. That's what he told him. And when the FBI got on airplanes and they flew towards Idaho in an airplane, they put out kill orders saying kill every adult on site. And the next day they attempted to do that. I'm looking at that bird over there, he's on top of the fridge. The following day, Randy comes out of the house. It's hot, it's August, I guess it's August, beginning of September, whatever the hell it is. And he comes out of the house to check on his boy's body that he'd put in the shed. And Randy tells me, personally, that he reaches up to a little turn wooden latch on the door. He reaches up to undo the latch and open the door. His son is on the tool bench in the shed, and he gets shot in the back. And he gets shot, I believe it was the right latissimus dorsi muscle, and it's through and through. And in hindsight only, much later, we know that he's hit with a .223, 5.56, virtually same thing, 22 caliber round. Entrance, exit, little damage, but he's shot. Randy begins to run back to the house, and he screams, "Vicky, Vicky, I've been shot." And as he's running up to the house to the door, Vicky Weaver, who's holding 22-month-old Elishaba in her arms, opens the door, and Lon Horiuchi, FBI sniper, shoots her with a .308 through the head. Sorry. What I'm reacting to is how many times I stood side by side with Randy Weaver and him telling me this story. And him crying. Yeah. I'm sorry. Shouldn't have this effect on me, but it does. I watched the pain of another man for a long time. So Randy continues in the story, and he says that Vicky just kind of drops to her knees. She's dead on impact. She drops to her knees, and then her head goes over towards the floor. She's still holding the baby. The baby's fine. And the bullet goes through her head, and Kevin was walking across the room, and the bullet hit him in the left arm, went through his arm into his chest, and stopped just shy of his heart. Now Kevin is wounded, Randy is wounded, Vicky is dead, Sammy is dead, and the dog is dead. I want to remind you, I'm going to do the punchline right here, because I beg you to listen to me, please. There's shit that's been hidden for so long, and none of these people have been held accountable, so please listen to this story. The punchline and the end of this story is that Randy and Kevin, and I was there every day, Randy and Kevin went through a trial. The government spent over $40 million fucking dollars to prosecute them. At the end of this trial, the jury witnessed FBI, ATF, and U.S. Marshals. This is literal. Every time they opened their fucking mouth in front of the jury, they were caught lying in that moment. That is the end of this case. That is the history of this case. That is how it is recorded. And not a fucking person who murdered these people has ever been held accountable. No one. Let's be very clear. Murder means unauthorized death. Who authorized the death of these people, and for why? So let me say it this way. If Randy Weaver and Kevin Harris are not guilty, who's guilty? If Randy and Kevin didn't contribute to any crime whatsoever on that mountain or anywhere else or at any time in the world, how the fuck do we have all these bodies on the ground and these people shot? Oh, it's 30 years ago? Some of you people listen to this aren't even that old. You don't even know what the fuck I'm talking about. But this has gone on and allowed to lay here like this forever. I have things to say about Randy Weaver. I have things to say about what was done to me, and the same situation that put Randy Weaver in jail put me in jail with him. Literally. And what was really strange, and I'll get into this, what was really strange was they kept Randy and I together like every day. We were in housing quarters, if you will. The first place we were in was Ada County Jail, and I'll tell you how I wound up in jail here. We'll go back to that, and we'll switch back to Randy, and then we'll do him and I together. Randy and I are in the Ada County Jail, and you'll hear how I wound up there. And that place was a shithole. That place should have been banned. This was before they had some new place, and it was a fucking tomb. And how they were treating us was an abomination. But every time Randy was moved somewhere, wherever that was, I don't know why, I went with him. Kevin never did. That's why it's noticeable. They kept Kevin and Randy apart, and they put me and Randy together every second of the day. And I think it was because they saw that Randy and I were like this, and we were always together talking. And I have a feeling they were probably trying to record us. I don't know, to get evidence or something. Do they do those things? I think they do. I think they were just simply trying to record us together to do what those sick fucks do. All right. Oh, let me think. So let me just comment on this. So Inspector Roderick ran down the hill, said what he said. Hey, we were ambushed. We never fired a shot. Deegan is dead. FBI puts out kill orders. Vicky's killed. Randy's shot. Kevin's shot. The next day, there's a holdout for about 11 days. I think on the 9th day, Kevin gave it up and had to go to the hospital because he was going to die. A friend of ours that we know by the name of, former Colonel Bogreitz, came up on, he was head of Special Forces in the Vietnam era, came up for Randy because, head of Special Forces and Randy being Special Forces, and tried to talk him out, which he did. I figured he'd get into a federal court and wind up in prison for the rest of his life because they're all a bunch of dirtbags and the truth would never come out. And boy, glad nobody listened to me because he came out shining. But so that's where the story's going to end up. FBI to this day, ATF, U.S. Marshals, all caught lying every single time they opened their mouth without exception. And we have all these bodies and nobody's been held accountable. So Randy's in jail. While he's in jail, I go back to, I'm getting notes on the door saying that this woman in the house and the two children, they're children to me, they're junior high school girls, are going to be raped or hurt, and this is what's coming along. Boise police will not assist me. Ada County sheriffs will not assist me. They won't even take my fucking report. Let me pause so you understand why. They were all in on it. All of them were in on it. There was an operation against me that was working with ATF. Let me jump forward in time to say that one day Randy and I and Kevin are riding back from court in the Crown Vic. Remember those things? Crown Victoria. Remember those cop cars? We're sitting in the back of a Crown Vic, and we're leaving the courthouse, and Randy says, "Hey, it was learned in my court today, that it was an ATF operation called Operation Trigger Lock, a thing to trick me into doing something that's illegal." Now think about what I'm saying. Randy's not doing anything illegal until somebody tricked him into tricked him. It was a hacksaw, thickness too short, this barrel. But they tricked him into sawing off a barrel so they could possibly arrest him for something. Well, they were doing the same thing to me. So as you hear my story, understand that I'm being worked in an ATF operation. Boise Police Department is in on it. Sheriff's Department is not. But the Sheriff's Department was alerted to stay the fuck away from me. They had an op going on. That operation was to trick me to allow unlawful firearms into the house so I could be arrested. Why would they want to do that? Because of the unrest I caused in Jacksonville, Florida, when I went after crooked feds and a crooked Sheriff's Department's detective division. Mostly it was the federal stuff. I don't think they cared about the Sheriff's Office. But both of those were going on at the same time. Let me just comment this to you so you understand how something followed me out of Florida before I moved. When I had been at the federal court building in Jacksonville one day, I'm there to get in a prosecutor's face. And I'm there to tell him I have evidence against you about what you did to a man that you prosecuted. I have evidence against you. I'm trying to tell him, you're going to jail, motherfucker. I actually have that conversation with him upstairs in his office. And this man he jumped up from his desk and says, "I didn't know anything about that." And he got real defensive, and you could tell he was scared. But while I was waiting to go upstairs, a man walked up to me. And I'm kind of halfway in the building, as I recall, in kind of a breezeway. And he says, "Hey, how are you?" And he said, "I'm a new U.S. Marshals. I just got hired." That was his language. "I just got hired. How are you?" And seemed like a nice guy. "Hey, how are you? Nice to meet you." And that was all there was to it. Nothing else. I went upstairs, had my business with this guy, told him I was going to fucking expose what he did, and I left. Back in those days, I had a car phone in my Jeep. This was before handheld cell phones, or if they had handheld phones, I didn't know about them. I had a fucking car phone. Oh my God, I feel like I'm doing disco or something. So, I had a car phone. So I'm driving home back to my apartment on the other side of town, and my phone rings, and somebody's saying, and of course this is the feds, somebody's saying these words to me 15 minutes after I leave that office. They're saying these words to me on the phone. "You need to forget about this. You need to drop this." Click, and they hang up. Well, I already know who it is. I don't feel particularly threatened, but I am hearing it. And then I get home to my apartment, and phone calls are now coming into my landline, and they're saying the same shit. "You need to drop this. You need to forget about this." Click. Well, I'm not listening very well. And I will tell you, in hindsight, unfortunately, I was very naive, which is polite for dumbass. I had no idea how powerful these people were. I was stupid to believe that if you have the truth that you can display in court, they're going to jail, and how could you possibly go to jail? You haven't done anything wrong. Boy, was I a fucking dumbass. So this shit followed me out of Jacksonville from the U.S. Marshals office. All right, let me finish that story. One day, one night, one evening, I'm in Jacksonville. There was a place along the river, and I think it was called On the River. And it was a place where there were a lot of commercial businesses and of all kinds, some restaurants and this and that, and there was a live band outside, and you could walk around, and there were hundreds of people. It was a very social thing. I think families were there, as I recall. But you could go in and out of all the businesses at nighttime, and it was lit up. It was really nice, and I liked it because it was outside. Back in those days, I think people smoked in bars, and I hated smoking and hated that stuff, so I loved being outside in a social gathering. So I went, and I'm standing there, and I've got an ale in my hand, a bottle of ale. I'm just kind of looking around and checking out all the women or whatever it was I did back in those days. And I look over to my left, and I see three guys huddled together, talking to each other, but all together looking back over at me. And then they would huddle back together, whisper, 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 and then look back at me. Now, let me tell you how I took that. I took them to be gay. That's what I thought was happening. And I didn't like it, and it was annoying me. And they kept doing it. Happened 3 or 4 times, and so I decided to move. I'll move to another location, get out of their visual range, and be done with it. So I move. Well, they follow me, and they're still standing off. I don't know where they, 15, 20 yards away, whisper among themselves, look back over at me. I'm going, God damn it. So I look over at them, and I kind of feign language. I'm not talking. They couldn't possibly hear me, and I'm like, what? Like, what the fuck? What do you want? That's what I do. Like, what do you want? And one of them walks over, and he goes, hi, you remember me? And I go, no, I don't. And he says, I introduced myself to you at the federal building as the the new U.S. Marshal on the job. I said, oh, yeah, I remember you. And we shake hands, and hey, how you doing? And he says, I don't know what's up with the feds. He says, but every time something happens in Jacksonville, they're always trying to pin it on you. Those were his exact words. Now, I'll also tell you that he appeared to be drunk. I took him as being drunk in that moment, and I took him as to be talking to me too much or talking at all too much, because as a U.S. Marshal, I knew in that moment, why the fuck would you tell me that? If you're law enforcement and people are trying to pin something on me, surely I must be a bad guy in your eyes, because that's how they're talking. And I took him to be drunk. Much later in hindsight, I realized I got worked. I was being worked. He wasn't drunk at all. And what they were doing was trying to coerce me into moving and get the fuck out of there, which I wound up doing. It started getting really hot where I lived, and the other story that goes on that I'm not doing here is my apartment was broken into, other things stolen, my bike, there was an attempted theft on my bike a second time, and just all kinds of stuff, and it always involved cops, dirty cops. It just kept going. In fact, it started getting physical. It started getting to the point where I was having physical contact with police and not having a problem at all with what I'm doing because I'm kicking their ass. And the police couldn't go to the police to get me for kicking their ass because what they were doing was illegal. And I couldn't go to the police because what I was doing was illegal. So nobody went to the police. We just, fought. And they were doing some pretty dirty, sneaky shit. It's a story for another day. And I moved. So the operation that ran against me, I later was able to prove was faxes that were sent from the U.S. Marshals Office to the Boise Federal Marshal's Office that I had possibly moved here, and here's what U.S. Marshals told law enforcement in Idaho, to include a very dear 30-year-old friend of mine who was a detective in Canyon County Sheriff's Office. I guess I'll leave his name out. But this detective friend of mine was told by David Hunt, Warren Mays, and Mike Johnson personally that I was an ex-cop. No, it wasn't. That I was an ex-prison guard who murdered somebody. Nope, that's not true. That I was a, what was I? An ex-hitman, an ex-gun runner. I'm trying to remember all of them. An ex-gun runner, I can't remember them all. And a martial artist who would rather kill you than look at you. They told that to my friend. So I have an affidavit from my friend. I could go get it and read it. In fact, it's sitting right over here, but I'm not going to do it. But here's what it basically says, that he was told these things by U.S. Marshals at the sheriff's office where he worked, and that he decided to conduct an investigation into David Hoffman. And he learned after this investigation that there wasn't a piece of paper on the planet that ever said David Hoffman was any of those things. And now we wanted to know why one law enforcement agency was coming to another and lying to him about David Hoffman, which are the kinds of accusations that could get him killed at some point in his life, which I agreed with. And that's been going on continuously to this day. There's 3 other accounts of this, and we'll leave it out for now. So an operation developed against me, and it was Operation Trigger Lock. So while on the same day that Randy Weaver learned that Operation Trigger Lock was the ATF operation done to entrap him into doing what he did, to bring him to trial, the same admission was made by ATF by Jane Hafner. In my court, it's Operation Trigger Lock. And when Randy told me that in the car, I went, holy smokes, that's what I just learned in court today at my trial. His trial was at one end of the hall and mine was at the other at the same time every damn time. Now, I had 3 trials. He had 1. I had 3. Because I kept catching the cops lying all the time. Boise PD specifically. And every time I would catch the cops lying, the judge shut down the shit show. He stopped the trial. He ended the trial. And then excuse me again, and then the prosecutor, whose name was Barry McHugh, would pick it up and charge me again, and I would never get out of jail. And this happened 3 times. Now, I'm going to just say something about Barry McHugh in case he ever sees this video. I think the feds are fucking filthy scumbag murdering cunts. And I believe I can prove that to this day. I'm an angry son of a bitch, and I use foul language because I enjoy it, especially when talking about them. Barry McHugh was not that guy. Barry McHugh, all the birds flying around, you'll probably see him. Barry McHugh was, I feel the wings, I feel the, I feel the air from his wings. Barry McHugh seemed like a pretty decent guy doing a job, and I don't think he knew how dirty the shit was that was going on. So I'm not going to foul-mouth Barry McHugh. But he was in on this from front to back, and when the judge dropped the case, we went into trial 2, I would catch him lying again. And until we went into a 3rd one. Now let me see, where should we go? So I get arrested and I'm sitting in jail, and I'm being told notes are still coming to the door. So I had met a woman who was a retired police person who was living in Boise, and I got her to move into the apartment with this woman and her 2 kids. I got her to move in and keep an eye on things and be armed, and that's what I did. And then this woman witnessed many things. So what happened was, I'm looking for this bird. Oh, there he is. So what happened was, right before I was arrested, a note comes to the door. I open the door to the apartment. A Sunday paper rolls into the door, and attached to it is a note, and I read it. That day, I contact the Idaho Statesman, is that what it's called? To find out who the carrier is for the area I live in, because I want to find out how the hell did this paper get on my doorstep, and what's the connection, and I'm trying to find this person who's leaving these notes, because we didn't take the paper. Turns out it was the paper was stolen off the neighbor's door and put on our door. But this is what's going on. I talked to the paper carrier on the phone. She's a 21-year-old girl, delivers papers in the wee hours of the morning when it's still dark out. It's now December. It's dark in the morning when she comes by. And while I'm there, before I got arrested, there's a knock at the door like 6:30 in the morning. I open the door. There's a girl standing there. I said, "Who the hell are you?" She says, "I'm your paper carrier. We talked on the phone last night." And I said, "Okay, come in." And she came in and sat on the couch, and I turned the tape recorder on, and she tells me this story. She said, 5 minutes ago, I was coming from the apartment complex behind yours to your complex. She says, a big man in a black mask walked up to her and said, "Hi, do you remember me?" And she said, "Who are you?" He says, "I'm the one that's been watching you, and if you don't stay away from this guy, David Hoffman, I'll hurt your family and I'll hurt you, and I'll see to it that you lose your job." So I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing an authority figure say, I can make you lose your job, and I'm hearing a bad guy say, "I'm going to hurt you and I'll hurt your family." The second I heard that, I said, "Cop. That's a cop. That's a cop playing a game." But he's actually out there scaring people and making them believe that they're under the threat of, rape, death, and abduction, or whatever was being said. So it kind of jacked my ass a little bit. I think it was soon after this I got arrested. So one day, this is how I get arrested. Let's see. Guess I can go to this. One day, there's a call to the house, and Tony Wallace, the detective, is on the phone. And he says, "We caught your stalker," which is the term I used. We ended up calling him a stalker. "We caught your stalker." I said, "Okay, how'd you do that?" He says, "Well, there were footprints in the snow behind your apartment. We followed it. We followed the footprints into the snow to where he lived, and we arrested him. He's under arrest. And we need you to bring Nancy down to the police station to possibly make an ID." I said, "Okay." So we get our coats on. I hang up the phone. We get our coats on. I put my hand on the doorknob, and I stopped, and I go, "What?" And I go, "No." I called the Tony Wallace back on the phone. I said, "How did you catch this guy again?" "Well, we found footprints in the snow behind your house, and we followed him back to his apartment, and blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Tony," I said, "all the snow's melted. What the fuck are you talking about?" And he says, "Well," he says, it's just how it worked, and we got him. We need you to come bring Nancy down." So I'm like, okay, and nothing's feeling right, but I'm going with it. So we go out the door. We go downstairs. My Jeep is parked right at the bottom of the stairs. We get in the Jeep, and the second I crank it on, my radio, which is on my visor, it looks like a handheld radio, but it's got all the police stuff in it. As soon as I light up the ignition to the vehicle, my radio lights up, and I hear heavy muscled guy, long hair, because I had long hair back then. Heavy muscled guy, long hair, blonde, coming down, just came down the stairs and got in the Jeep. And I heard that, and I turned to Nancy and I said, "There's cops out here. They're talking about us." I said, "Do me a favor." I said, "Get out of the car and go back up to the apartment. I'll be right there." So she gets out of the car. I hear on the radio, "Blonde going back upstairs." And I go, "Son of a bitch." So I go up the stairs, and I call Wallace back. And I say, "You got cops all out here that I can't see them. What the fuck are you doing?" And so he says, "Okay, I admit it. We have a warrant for your arrest." He didn't say for what. "We have a warrant for your arrest, and you got to give up. You got to come outside and give up." Long story short, I talked to him for about 5 minutes on the phone, realized I was going to jail, walked outside. Guys in black, guys, wait a minute, here we go. Big guys in black masks came around the corner, just like the guy that black mask that walked up to the paper carrier and said, "Hey, I'll fuck up your family and I'll hurt you if you don't," those guys. So really what we had a stalker behind my house that the paper carrier saw. My house is surrounded by guys in black masks and machine guns. But they didn't see the other guy in a black mask that was threatening the paper carrier, who by the way was so proud of himself that according to the paper carrier, he took his mask off in front of her so she could see his face. She said, "Oh, he was a good-looking guy," and blah, 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 blah. that'll come into play later on my third trial. Because the court ordered a photo ID lineup of cops so we could identify this guy. So I'm arrested and I'm in jail. Now I'm in jail with Randy Weaver. A lot of stuff happened. You know, we go back and forth from court. We're learning things. I'm going to tell you something that I don't believe can hurt me today. Statute of limitations is up and there's nothing they can do, so fuck them. So I went into a second trial, and here's the end of that trial, I think. I'll tell you what came in the middle, but let me go to the end. The girls went to a school. Remember I told you they walked to school. They walked to school, and so they have resource officers in schools these days, and they had one. So while I'm sitting in jail, I get a friend of mine from the gym, an attorney who happens to be an attorney. I said, go down to the school and talk to this guy and see what you can find out about the girls being at school. Now, here's what the police had said. I had filed a motion to suppress all the evidence, which were firearms, because the police were in my home without a search warrant, and they searched my house without a warrant. They find guns. The guns I was tricked to bringing in the house. I admit I allowed the guns in the house, and they weren't lawful. And I admit it. I did that. And I asked the judge to suppress the evidence, and he denied it. Because the cops had got up and said, well, Judge, you know, we were concerned about the children. It's always about the children. We were concerned about the children, you know, and until we cleared the house and knew that there were no firearms in there, we couldn't let the kids back in the house. So we had to clear the house and, you know, concerned about the children. Okay, so that's what they told him. Judge denied my motion. So I send this guy down to go talk to the resource officer, who said the following: that he was at the school, knew of my arrest that was upcoming, was told by his superiors at BPD to hold the girls at school until I was arrested, and then to drive them home to their apartment after all was over. And that's what he did. And when he said that, and I filed a motion in brief to the court and showed that the police had lied about the search and they didn't have exigent circumstances, once again, my trial was squashed. And oh, by the way, I had been on the second trial. On the second trial, I had been convicted and sentenced to 7 years in prison. And I was sitting around in a jail waiting to be carted away. And I'm sitting around in the jail with Randy. We're going to talk in a minute how it was I didn't go. So I'm sentenced. Oh, we just flew in front of my face. So let's go there. While I'm sitting in the Ada County jail, you hear that, Ada County? Yeah, it was your place. While I'm sitting in the Ada County jail, I asked to go to the law library. Now, I had no plan. This is not a planned event. This is me taking it as it comes in front of my face and working with it. And this is how I developed my skills to be a private detective, and I was really, really good. I was really good. So I asked to go to what they call the law library in the jail. It was just a little room with some law books in it. I mean, it was a tiny little nothing closet of a room. And I'm sitting in that room. And that room is on a hallway. And there were dorm areas that people were being housed in. Randy and I were always kept in a shithole, individual, toilet cell, gross fucking place. But on this hallway, there were dorms, and what was going on is that I could see through the glass into the dorms, and they could see me in my little orange jumpsuit. I'm in the law library. If I walk down the hallway, the length of one hallway, there's dorms to the left and right. There's a deputy type office on the left, and at that deputy's office on the left, you can take a left. There's a skinny hallway there that went into a gym. And right across the doorway from the office, there's this 90-degree corner in this hallway, is the law library. Long hallway with these dorms. So I'm in the law library thing. I check the door. It's unlocked. I'm looking in that office. There's a is it convex? Convex, yes. There's a convex mirror on the crook of the ceiling and the wall that sees all the way down the hall to booking, a long ways, but I can see if anybody's coming down the hall. And long before they could ever get down the hall, if I were out walking around, they would never see me, and I'd go back inside the law library thing. And I'm looking at that office, and you know what's in that office? A police computer. Now, I didn't know shit about computers in those days, and this is around 94, maybe. And Randy and I have been sitting in jail for a long time together, going back and forth to court. Both of us under Operation Trigger Lock. Same Marshals, same ATF, same everybody, same players. Committing crimes against citizens so they can arrest them and take them to trial. And I'm looking at that computer in there. I don't know shit about computers. And I go over and I test the door, and the door is unlocked on that office. I go in that room. People over in the dorms are now looking out. They can see me in the office in my little orange jumpsuit. I'm afraid somebody's going to tell on me, but I go, screw it. And I sit down behind the desk, and I get on that computer, and I don't know what I'm doing. I'll just admit, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know how to run the damn computer, back in 94. So, but what I'm doing is, I'm on the screen, and I'm typing in, I'm hitting F keys. Remember the F keys? We don't use those anymore. I'm hitting F keys, which bring up different menu options as you go down from 1 through 10 or whatever it is. And different menu stuff's coming up, and there are different data banks of different types of files being stored. Arrests, parking tickets, there's all kinds of shit in there. And there really was. Parking tickets, arrests, reports, all this stuff. And on each F key, I start typing in every single name that I know, which are people in my life. The name of this woman, the kids. I didn't know what I was doing. I start typing everything in, and I start finding files. I start finding files of Nancy Denise Joyner, who is driving my Jeep around town for a long-ass time, and it's got parking tickets all over fucking town, and these parking tickets have been cleared. Police clear the parking tickets. And they only clear them if you're parked outside a courthouse and you get a ticket. They'll wipe it clean for you. Other than that, you got to pay the damn ticket. And she's getting tickets all over town, and they're being wiped clean. And I'm going, what the fuck is that? And then I'm looking, and it says in a report that her driver's license from Florida is suspended, and she's driving back and forth all over the place, and the police know she's driving around, and they're not touching her. I'm going, what is going on here? This woman is untouchable. And then I pull up the donut caper, remember that with the kids? And as I'm looking at files, I come to learn in the files that on the exact same day that we went to get the kids at the police station and we came out, our stalker is reported to the police as beginning on the same day. She goes out of my sight in front of police for an hour, and we come back and we've got a stalker. And I'm starting to put together this is a police operation. And so I gather all of this evidence and all of these files, and I print it out on a printer, and I carry all of this shit back to where they got me housed, and nobody was ever the wiser. And I used all of these materials in court to catch what these cops were doing. So based on what I found inside the computer and all the files, and based on the affidavit of the cop who said he brought these kids home after I was arrested, the judge realized he'd been lied to again by the police. He vacated the sentence, And he suppressed all the evidence, and he cleared the conviction, vacated the sentence. Now I'm going into a third trial. And then there came a point, and they told me if I would take a deal, they would let me out right now. I said, I'm not taking a deal. I went back to jail, and eventually they came back to me after a long period of time, and I wound up hitting the streets, and I was free. Okay. Randy left jail about 2 months before me. I actually never saw Randy again. We talked on the phone several times. I was supposed to go meet him. He was living in Montana. But that was my case. That was my case that stole almost 2 years of my life and Randy's life. And they set us up. And people look at me today and, oh, you were arrested for firearms violation and this and that, like I'm some piece of shit, and they don't have a clue what really was going on behind it. After this time period, I became a private investigator, and I was really, really, really good. And I probably got a couple stories out of that, including a murder case that I am going to do. When I say do, I'll do a video here about it. And we'll discuss the evidence I have where Boise Police Department and FBI lied about the shooting of one cop, the wounding of another, and 2 young men who were brothers who were shot down. History has recorded a lie, and I am the only person in the world still living that knows about it. And the evidence in that case is overwhelming. And yet these fuckers got away with it. They always get away with it. So I would say to Kash Patel and Donald Trump, Randy died, as everybody knows, a handful of years ago. His grown daughters are beautiful girls. Oh my gosh. They grew up to be beautiful girls. I think they're all living in Montana. They don't know who I am. That's not relevant that they know. But I'm the last guy walking on the earth connected to any of this, connected to the murder case that I want to talk about, connected to Ruby Ridge to push this. Now, like I said before, there's another fellow I know by the name of Ammon Bundy. And the feds, meaning the FBI and BLM, attempted to murder him and his family, and they got caught. And you probably don't know that as the public, but he sat for jail in 2 years too. And the day that these guys got caught trying to murder the Bundy family, the next day, all these guys were let out of jail. You never heard that part, did you? That bird's up on top of my monitor. I'm gonna let you out in a minute here, sweetheart. Okay, I'll open the door and you'll get out. I'm not gonna run around chasing you. I'll just open the door, okay? I have bats come down here sometimes, and I catch the bats in my hand and I take them out. I love bats. This guy came down the chimney here, and I leave the door open. It's a firebox glass insert thing, you know, like a what do you call it, a wood stove thing, but it's an insert in a fireplace. And I leave the glass door open so they don't get caught in the box, and that would be panicky. And I let them fly around the house until I find them and let them out. That's what's going on. All right, I hope I told everything here. I'm very angry that Lon Horiuchi shot Vicky Weaver in the head and he's still walking around. Do you guys remember Waco? Randy Weaver and I were standing side by side, staring up at a TV. They eventually moved us to the Canyon County Jail, Randy and I together. We were the first human beings to walk into the Canyon County Jail. I don't know if anybody knows that. We were the first. Now, I have a handful of friends I can count on one hand. I got my detective buddy. I've got a couple of deputies and some other folks. They're all law enforcement, and they were working in Canyon County. And do you know they are my dearest friends today? We're talking 30 years of tight friendship. They were cops, now they're ex-cops, and we're very, very dear friends. Do you want to know why we're dear friends? Well, you have a choice of believing they're dirtbag groupies. I'm a dirtbag, and they're dirtbag groupies, and they love hanging out with dirtbags, and it could be that. Or it could be they sat and watched all this shit. They watched it happen right in front of them. By the way, I want to say this. I got to say this. Those guys down at the Canyon County Sheriff's Office fucking hated those feds. They saw those pompous ass marshals and thought they were the biggest strutting dicks they ever saw in their life. And I was standing right there in the hallway with several deputies when I wasn't at court this day with Randy. And when Randy and Kevin were found not guilty, it came out over the TV, and the deputies were standing around, and there was a lot of them. And I'm standing there. I don't know why I'm out in the hallway. I can't remember what I would have been doing out there, but I was out there for some reason. And when they were announced not guilty, those guys and women threw their hands up in the air and went, "Yes, right on." Oh my God, I'll never forget it. Everybody knew that case with Randy stunk. And all of these deputies were watching me very closely because they had a real sneaking suspicion there was some dirty shit going on in my case too. And so I became friends with a lot of these people, and we are dear friends to this day. And I'm do you know that when I walked out of that jail, do you know that there were deputies in uniform waiting for me to take me to go get a place to live? There were two. I'm going to tell you, I said something that makes me laugh. There were two females. There were two female deputies, armed and everything. Lovely people who were waiting for me when I walked out because they knew, I'm walking out on the street with nothing, to take me to a place to find, get an apartment and blah, blah. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. But I mostly remember the horrors. I remember the death. I remember that. So I started something I didn't finish. Randy and I were looking at a TV one day. I didn't finish when he was still in the jail with me. And Waco is going on. I want you folks to know right now, I'll talk about the story of how Lon Horiuchi, who shot Vicki Weaver in the head, is the one that was driving the tank with the flamethrower unit on it, where he punched a hole through the wall of the building with the muzzle of the tank with the flamethrower unit on it, and burned alive over 70 men, women, and children in Waco. And that fucking bitch is still walking around alive to this day, and no one has ever been held accountable for those murders. Why am I the only one up here talking about this shit? Does anybody out there have a conscience besides me? Alright, I guess I better go. I see I've been on here for an hour 20. I hope I made sense. There are murderers walking around, and they're not being held accountable. And they need to be held accountable. All right, I guess I just better go. If you got to this point, thank you for your patience. But I'm going to be out there pushing this. I'm not done. Far from it.